Welcome to Tips for Gamers. Today we're going to talk about the top 25 polls, what they got right, what we believe they got wrong. Let us know if you guys agree with these, if you agree with what they said. I feel like this is very political. It just seems like over and over and over it just becomes this political statement for whatever reason. And I'm sure you guys can think of, your own reasons. I know I can think of some reasons as to why it's political, but it's something that just, it becomes frustrating because I actually don't believe the AP polls anymore. I don't think the AP polls do any justice, and I think the problem is why we are in the situation that we're in with AP polls is due to the fact that we didn't have playoffs for the longest time, and then we turned to having a 4-game playoff with 100 teams, 100 plus teams. So it had to be political, because if you're not political, you're not going to be able to push, your favorite team. You're not going to be able to push a certain agenda. You're not going to get what you want to get out of it. So I think you have to push that. And I think the top 4 becomes this very political statement that they try to get you in the top 4 immediately, or they keep you in the top 4 in the beginning of the year and then they immediately pull you out the first chance they get. So for Georgia, keeping them at number 1, I'm okay with this. Now, I do believe that they should eventually drop down for their week schedule. I do. I'm not saying they should drop out of the 4, but if you're playing such a weak schedule, it's really hard to actually grade you. And you're kind of struggling in the beginning of these games with some teams that are, quite frankly, they're not even conference teams. They're terrible. And Georgia's just not looking like the same team. They don't look like the number 1 team. They just don't. And it's hard to say when they're going to look like that number 1 team because they don't play anyone. And I know Georgia fans will say, well, we had Oklahoma on our schedule and the SEC pulled it from us. But even having Oklahoma on your schedule, it's still weaker than the Big Ten East by far. I mean, you look at the Big Ten East, you got Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan who have to play each other every single year. And only one of those teams can make it to the conference championship game. And every year at the end, people will use that against them and say, well, they didn't make it to their conference championship game. And yet that'd be like the SEC putting in Alabama, Georgia, and LSU all in the same conference, all in the same division, and saying only one of you can make it out alive. Those teams get penalized for having such a tough schedule. They literally get penalized for that. And it's insane to me because I hear it all the time. Ohio State, they didn't make it to their conference championship game. Why should they be out? Well, they're still the team that beat up on Georgia and was the better team that night, in my opinion, and in Kirby Smart's opinion. He said they probably should have won that game. That was from their own coach's mouth. And so for me, I just think that schedule is incredibly weak. And I know Georgia fans will also say the same thing. Oh, well, it's not our fault. We make everyone around us look like trash. Well, that's not an argument because UT Martin, Ball State, and UAB are not good, and I don't care what you say. Vanderbilt is not good. Florida is not the old Florida of what we used to know. They're not that great. Sorry, they're not the guys. So I don't think that they should get credit for playing such a weak schedule, and on top of it right now, I think they should stay number 1, but I also think that they need to start to get adjusted accordingly due to the fact that their schedule is so weak. I'm not saying be dropped out of the top 4. I'm just saying if you keep playing cupcakes, you shouldn't get rewarded for the entire prize. It's a little bit tough for me to do that. So at number 2, we have Michigan, and I'm okay with this. Michigan has a tough schedule. The beginning part of their schedule is weak, but what teams isn't? So I can't really give them crap for that. They're doing what they typically do. They're not one of those teams that's going to beat you by 87 points. They're not going to run up the score like Oregon. They're just going to play their type of football. Run on you a lot, short passes, occasionally break it for a big one with a deep pass. That's just the way they are. They play solid defense, good defensive line. They'll get after the quarterback. That's Michigan. Michigan's not going to beat you by a high margin. That's not going to happen. So I'm okay with them being number 2 right now. So at number 3, I don't have Florida State, and I don't agree with Florida State being number 3. I have Ohio State or Penn State, and then at number 4, I have Ohio State or Penn State. And you could pick. I'm fine with moving one way or the other. I think even Penn State could probably be at number 3, and that would make even slightly more sense just because of how they're doing right now, the quarterback that they have. But Florida State got a lot of credit, and I think too much credit for beating LSU. To me, this doesn't make sense because think about it. Let's just think about it this way. So Texas beats the 3rd ranked, who wasn't the 3rd ranked, Alabama. They love to throw Alabama up there. And Texas is behind Florida State, who beat the 5th ranked LSU. So they don't even believe in their own rankings to begin with. It's obvious. If they believed in their rankings, Texas would be ahead of Florida State because you beat the third-ranked team, right? Compared to them beating the fifth-ranked team. And you beat Alabama at home. So I don't understand how, even in their own rankings, they're just not logical. The other thing is this. Why did you discredit Ohio State to begin with? Why did you remove them from number 3? Oh, I know why. Because you were pushing a narrative to push Alabama up there. That's the only reason. Because Ohio State struggled, and it wasn't even really a struggle. There was not a single Ohio State fan who thought they were going to lose against Indiana. And I hate to break it to you, but Indiana's better than Youngstown State, Delaware. They're better than Stanford. They're better than Southern Miss. They're better than UNLV. They're better than Ball State. They have NFL guys on their roster. A lot? No. But they're still better, and they're a conference team. Okay, so they know how Ohio State works. They're used to playing these guys. Ball State is not used to playing Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State continuously every single year, multiple times. They're not used to playing all of those schools. It's just not going to happen, right? That's not set up for them. So I don't know why Ohio State gets penalized for losing as many guys as they lost to into the draft, and then they were testing out their team. They weren't trying to run up the score on Indiana, and Indiana was also not trying to score. All they were doing was literally handing it off, letting the clock go down, and trying to say, well, let's not lose by a lot of points. That's all Indiana was doing. They weren't even trying to score. They were just trying not to get scored on. They accepted the defeat. So for Ohio State testing out multiple quarterbacks, testing out new offensive linemen, working their system, they got penalized. And I'm telling you, when Ohio State figures it out, Ohio State's going to be dangerous. But yet they penalize them for figuring out their team, and they don't penalize other teams for figuring stuff out. It's like last year. Ohio State got penalized. They lost ranking when they beat Notre Dame when Notre Dame was ranked number 5. They lost ranking. That's insane to me. And then it proves everyone wrong in the AP polls last year because Ohio State was the only team that did what they did against Georgia. The only team. Even Kirby Smart said, well, Ohio State probably should have won that game. Ohio State was the better team last year. And so all the AP polls were wrong. Completely wrong. So to me, this stuff just does not make sense. I don't get why you penalize Ohio State. And Penn State right now is the scariest team in college football. There's not a team I think that's going to beat Penn State if they were to play tomorrow. And I don't think Alabama was truly ranked number 3. Obviously they weren't. You got it wrong. Okay, so you're getting several things wrong here that just don't make sense. And LSU was not ranked 5th. I don't care that they beat Gambling State this week by 72 points. I just don't care. It wasn't 72. It was like 62 points or whatever because they scored 72 and Gambling State scored 10. Who the hell's Gambling State? So for Florida State, I just don't agree that you should be ahead of Texas, Ohio State, and Penn State, and I don't agree that you should go into the playoff strictly alone from beating Clemson and LSU. That part I struggle with. I really struggle with. I think they're a playoff team if you're talking 12 teams, but right now to throw them up and say they're the number 3 team, to me, is just doesn't make sense. I think they're a good team, but do I think they're a top 3 team? I don't. And I'm not even talking power rankings. I'm talking about purely of what we've seen in the AP polls. It just doesn't make sense. And if it made sense, you should at least be behind Texas because they beat the 3rd-ranked team supposedly. To me, at number 3, I'd have I could throw Penn State up there and be okay. And then at number 4, I'd have Ohio State. At number 5, I'd have Texas. At number 6, I'd have Florida State. And then I would put USC at number 7. That's what I would have. I just don't think that some of these teams should get credited. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, USC got bumped up ahead of Ohio State for beating Stanford. I know Stanford's really tough. No, those kids are too busy doing their homework over reading the playbook, apparently, because their football team sucks and has sucked after Christian McCaffrey. Next up, we have Washington at number 8. I'm okay with this. I'm fine with that. I think you could interchange Washington and Notre Dame, and I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't have an issue with that. Alabama at 10, okay. I still would probably bump them down a little bit more personally because I just don't think. I think Alabama. The problem that they had against Texas is that Texas was faster than them. Alabama was bigger, but not stronger. That did not help them. And Alabama's run game, not great. It did not look great. Alabama's passing attack, that quarterback, needs a lot of work because he is very good at running, but passing, yikes, not the best. Okay, so with Alabama, I think they have a great roster. I think they're going to beat up on a lot of teams, but I also think that a lot of teams could beat them. Tennessee, They lost to. I'm confused with Tennessee because Tennessee, I think, is getting a lot more credit than they should have. I think Tennessee is around that 15 range. I think Tennessee can be beat by quite a few teams. I really do. And I don't know really what Tennessee did to be ranked so high. You lost so many guys. This is not the same team of last year. You lost so many dudes on your team. And Tennessee is not one of those high-producing ranking teams when it comes to recruiting. They're not that team. You know, they're not dominating in the transfer portal. They're not dominating on the recruiting trail. So Tennessee, in my opinion, is going to take some losses this year. I don't know how many, but I don't think Tennessee is a true playoff contending team this year. I think they're on a better path, but I think they're okay. Utah beat Florida, and that was basically their coup de grace there. And they struggled like hell against Baylor, who Baylor lost. I think Baylor lost to Texas State the week before. Baylor is not, they're kind of questionable, okay? And they took it to Utah. But Utah, that was a conference game. They know how to play against them, and that happens. That tends to happen. And then you have Oregon. Oregon struggled against Texas Tech. Texas Tech gets a little bit of an unfair ranking a little bit. And the reason I'll say that is just because Texas Tech does better than people think. Texas Tech beat Ole Miss, beat the socks off of Ole Miss last year. And I know it's not all the same team, but that quarterback from Texas Tech was playing out of his gourd. And Oregon, they look a little bit suspect. Okay, so I'm okay with them being there, but I don't know. I think some of these teams could have an argument to be bumped up ahead of them, but I'm okay at this point in time. LSU at 14, I'd probably drop them even lower than that. I just would. I would make LSU earn it back because LSU just has not proved that they are that team. They just haven't proved that. I know you're doing good in recruiting. You have done good in recruiting, but that doesn't translate to wins apparently. And it hasn't for LSU for many years now, besides when they had Joe Burrow. And that was transfer. Kansas State, I don't think I would have them above Oregon State, personally. I think Oregon State shows that they're better. So I'm okay with it, but I'd put some teams ahead of them if it was my choice. Ole Miss bumping up. Why Ole Miss bumped up is beyond me. They scored majority of those points with 4 minutes left in the game. Seriously, they were down by, I think it was 3 points with 4 minutes and something left. And then they ended up scoring, padding on the stats at the end. Ole Miss did not look good. And I know it was Tulane, but remember, a couple of years ago, they gave Ohio State crap for beating the socks off of Tulane. Said, it was just Tulane. But when the SEC does it, apparently it's big news. Tulane's, they're actually a Super Bowl contending team. And I don't get it because Ole Miss just simply did not look good. They didn't look good in several facets of the game. Offensive line, defensive line, cornerbacks, just scheme. Ole Miss just looked shaky. They just didn't look good. CU, fan favorite. Everyone loves CU. I think CU didn't actually play a ranked team this year. TCU, to me, was not ranked. That team was not the same team of last year. I know I keep hearing the same thing of, well, that team was in the national championship game last year. I get it. I understand. But it wasn't that team. Okay, it's a completely different team. They did not have Max Duggan. They didn't have Quentin Johnston. They didn't have several of the guys the running back. They didn't have several defensive guys. Very few of those guys actually returned, if you're talking total team. So CU is a scary team to play, no doubt. With Nebraska, I think Nebraska actually would have beat them if Nebraska had a competent quarterback. Okay, because that quarterback I don't know what he was doing back there, but that dude just seemed like he couldn't catch a shotgun snap. Which is that's usually quarterbacks in college can't they have trouble with getting under center. Not at the shotgun. That guy had trouble. Sims had trouble with the shotgun snap. I believe there was a stat where he turned it over 6 times in 6 quarters. I mean, they put their defense on the field 24/7. And their defense was dominating CU for good portion of that game. But then when you just keep your defense out the entire game, and then you also not only keep your defense out, but then you give CU the ball in the red zone because you throw an interception, your team's going to lose. You can't turn it over that many times and expect to win. You can't do it. And it wasn't just him. Running back has some fault in that as well. That kid turns over the ball. Their running backs have fumbled more times than I would like to count already this season. I think CU deserves the respect, but to bump them up ahead of Oklahoma I think is ludicrous. Look, Deion Sanders, I hope he continues. I hope he keeps crushing. I'm not hating on CU, but I can't give him love more than everyone else. I can't do it. Because why should you be ahead of Oklahoma? Why? Oklahoma is showing that if Oklahoma played CU, I would have CU losing that game. And I think CU's doing great. I think CU's going to end up being a powerhouse eventually in time. I think they have the possibility if they go and get the offensive lineman. Okay? But to say that, well, CU because they beat Nebraska and TCU, who TCU is really not that great, I don't think that warrants enough to say you're 18th. I think you're still in the 20s, in my personal opinion. Most other teams would not get that same credit. They just wouldn't. Oklahoma, I think they should be higher than that. I think Oklahoma should be higher than Ole Miss. You can argue Oklahoma should be higher than Oregon State, Kansas State, and possibly even Utah. I think Oklahoma is a good enough team to fear. And I think Oklahoma has showed that enough. But to drop them after SMU, not quite sure I'm on that same page. Now, North Carolina with Appalachian State, I think they should have been dropped because, boy, oh boy, North Carolina looked horrible. But they get the credit because they beat an SEC school. And I get it. And they have a quarterback who is looking to be a top 5 pick. We'll see how this year pans out for him. But North Carolina's not looking so great right at this moment in time. Duke, I think Duke needs to get more respected. I don't know what Duke has to do to get a little bit more respect. I mean, you beat Clemson. Clemson, I get it. Clemson is not the Clemson we've known in prior years. But why does Duke not get credit more? I mean, Duke beat a much tougher team than CU did. Nebraska and TCU are not at the level of Clemson. And Duke did not get the respect for that. So if you're a Duke fan, I could totally understand you being pissed off and being like, wait, we should be ahead of Oklahoma. We should be ahead of Oregon State. We should be ahead of Kansas State. I'd be okay with that. I would have no issue with throwing Duke up higher because Duke actually played a very talented team who I know is not ranked now, but I can guarantee you this, there is no one who wants to play Clemson. Very few teams want to play Clemson. Florida State is not looking at Clemson and going, this is going to be a cakewalk. I can promise you that. And if they are, you're ludicrous for doing that. That's insane. So Duke, they won 8 games last year, I believe, and Duke deserves some credit. Miami's looking solid. They did steal a running back last year from Ohio State, and I believe that was due to NIL money, and they just did great. They've been just looking clean. They're looking aggressive. I think the Big Ten needs to go and snag them. I think it's just about time. You got to go and snag up Miami. Whenever the ACC falls, you got to go get Miami. Try to get Florida State too, but Miami's looking good. Miami's hard to rank because Texas A&M is just, what the hell is that? Jimbo Fisher, what the hell? What the hell's going on? How do you have that good of a recruiting class, but your team is just, whoa, like that? It doesn't matter. The recruiting class is just like, wow. If you have an incompetent coach, I don't know how he still has his job at Texas A&M. I have no idea because I can guarantee you that Texas A&M doesn't need a coach to recruit. They got the NIL money on lock. So Jimbo Fisher, I don't know how the hell you still have your job, but Miami's looking good. I'm not going to take it away from Miami. Your defense, a little bit, but still good enough. You're looking good. I think you could even be ranked higher. Washington State, shocker. I think Washington State was pissed off at the Big Ten in general and the fact that they had a Big Ten schedule. They were like, dude, we can't wait. Because Washington State is the team that's left behind in the Pac-12. I think Wisconsin's good. I do. I think Wisconsin's a top 25 team in power ranking. I definitely do. But I think Wisconsin was at the mercy of a team that was foaming at the mouth. I think Washington State was like, we're left behind. The Big Ten is the arch nemesis because you stole our best teams. And so when they got a chance to face Wisconsin, oh my God, it was like they played with just like vigor, just absolute anger when they played Wisconsin. And you could see it. Wisconsin was like, why are you so angry? And they're like, dude, we're here to kill you. And they were like, whoa, really? This is football. And they're like, you don't understand. Like, you stabbed us. And so that's what they were feeling. And boy, oh boy, watch out for Washington State. They're bounty hunting right now. This is not just football for them. This is bounty hunting. Okay, they have a bounty, and they're the ones who put the bounty on the other teams, and they're collecting the bounty. I mean, that's Washington State in my eyes. They're crazy. That's a crazy team. Watch out for them. I'm telling you. I don't care who they're playing. If you're a Big Ten team, watch the hell out because they're gunning for you. If you're an SEC team, they're coming after you. That team is angry at everyone who's been a part of conference realignment. Jesus Christ. UCLA? You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Iowa? That defense is just stupid. How has that defensive coordinator not been stolen by now? Jesus Christ, Iowa. God dang, if you had a competent offense, they'd be the scariest team in all college football. Terrifying. If they had Ohio State's offense, my Lord, holy butt cheeks, that team would just be terrifying. And I'm not saying, I think Ohio State's defense is going to be a top 3 defense. I think Ohio State's defense is scary. Ohio State's defense needs to just prove that they could do more. And I don't know what exactly it is, but they need to prove that they just need to get the lights out numbers. But Iowa is just like the cleanest defensive football I've ever seen in my life. I would love to see an NFL team go against Iowa. I really would, because I'd be shocked to see what an Iowa team could do again. I bet you they'd stop NFL teams. Not a lot, but enough to where it'd shake you in your boots and go, Jesus Christ, this Iowa team. Iowa definitely is in the top 25. And anyone to disagree with that, you crazy. You're crazy. I'm calling it right now because Iowa is just, their defense is, wow. They're like, they will literally they will win the game for their team because we will score touchdowns on defense. And they will compete with touchdowns against their offense. And it's the most boring game to watch if you don't love defense. They'll win a game by 5 points. You're like, what the hell is this? So, anyways, that's what we agree or disagree with. And so, yeah, let us know what you guys think down below.